The premise of Veiled Fate is this. You are a god. I mean, I know you were always telling everyone that, but now it's actually true. You're a god, and you have a particular investment in one of the 9 demigods, who, of course, are all associated with a different color. You want this demigod to be the most renowned demigod in the world, because then they can ascend and be a god, and you can just hang out with them all the time. Unfortunately, all the other gods around the table have a particular investment in a different demigod. So it's up to you to move your demigod up through the ranks and squash all the other ones. But here's the thing, because everyone else around the table are also gods, they can manipulate each demigod's renown at will as well. And so the whole point of Veiled Fate is to hide that identity of the demigod until you're able to claim victory and bluff that you're actually helping other demigods move up in renown, when really you've got all of your points invested in one particular character. That's the general overview. Veiled Fate is a social deduction game with a heavy emphasis on the deduction aspect, and really you could play it almost without any social and without any deduction, and it would still end up being a good game. But with the social elements around the table and the ability to bluff, this is a game that is really, really good. So I picked this up at Origins. Ivy Games gave it to me. They didn't say, hey, listen, we're giving this to you, make a review out of it. They gave it to me and they said, I hope you enjoy it. And I have really enjoyed it. And I think anybody who's a fan of games with bluffing in them will enjoy this as well. So you're gonna get a card at the beginning. That card's gonna have a color. You want to move that color up the ranks while not letting other people know that you're moving that color up the ranks, because then they can work together to just tank that god's reputation if they figure it out. It plays from 2 to 8, so there's going to be a range of gods that are available, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. But it doesn't matter at the end of the game how many demigods are in front of your particular god. The only thing that matters is that none of your competitors are in front of your particular god. The game takes place over 3 rounds. Each of these rounds has a similar structure. You're going to get to take 1 or 2 moves, and these moves are usually just moving a god one space adjacent. The city is adjacent to everything in the middle. Or if you're in a particular slice of the pie, then you're adjacent to the city and the 2 other slices of pie that you're beside. You can also do some special god powers, which I'll touch on in a second. The majority of the moves in the game, though, are going to be moving a demigod onto these quests. And when you move a god onto a quest, you also have to commit a card from your hand, which will influence the balance of that quest. It will influence what happens to those gods. Everybody who puts a demigod in there gets to put one of these cards, and then when the quest is completely full, you'll reveal the cards, see what the majority of the symbols are in those cards, and then apply the results of that column to the god. So if there's more scorpions, you would take all the symbols on the right side of the card. If there's more feathers, you'd take all the symbols on the left side of the card. And the symbols are very simple. They're usually move up 1 on the reputation track, or move down 1 on the reputation track. That's it. Wait for it, there's more. There's even move up 2 on the reputation track and move down 2 on the reputation track. That's pretty much what you're calculating. The only other thing that could happen is the god gets smoted. There's a smiting of the god, they're absolutely smitten, and they're sent to the abyss on the board, which then takes them a little while to get back into play and be involved in other quests, and it moves them to the back of the line of their respective slice of pie number on the reputation track. Because position matters. If at the end of the game everybody's at 2 points, which won't happen, but let's just say it will, then whoever's in the front who got there last will win the game. And so if you've been smoted, you're at the back of the line, and that means, you're not going to win that time. You move gods around until all the quests are completed, or everybody passes, or people are taking moves that don't involve either gaining a card or using cards for stuff, so it stops this just being a perpetual moving people around. Then you're kind of forced to pass. When everybody passes, the round ends, you move on to the second one, keep it going from there. There are 2 other things that happen at the end of every round. There's also going to be a global mandate that's going to happen. You can use leftover cards in your hand to vote on 2 different outcomes. Some that will raise the reputation of some gods, some that will lower the reputation of the gods. Because the whole game is just manipulating these different tracks. Essentially, you're manipulating them in interesting ways, and you're trying to not reveal your hand too early while pushing up the actual demigod of your choice. But that's it. It's a very simple game in its essence. The other thing that you can do on your turn, instead of just moving your god around, is you can do these super powerful god powers, which cost you 3 cards in your hand, or 2 cards, or an extra card, and they allow you to manipulate the board state even more. So you can swap 2 people's positions, or you can move someone onto a space that they otherwise wouldn't have been allowed to move on. Stuff like that. This comes at a pretty huge cost because you're basically sacrificing moves down the line, but it might be worth it if you need to get your god in a specific position to win the game. Usually, in my experience, you'll use these powers at the end of the game because they're so costly that you're not going to spend them on a bluff. Or maybe you are. Maybe you will spend them on an early bluff and make your competitors spend all their time dealing with that one thing, and then you're sneakily moving up the green person into the lead. That could be a strategy. And I think that defines the core exciting part of the game. It is this bluffing element. This game is chock full of what I like to describe as above the table interaction. Not the actual physical things that are happening on the board, but the discussions that it creates around the table and the relationships that it creates around the table. I think this facilitates that in an exceptional way, or rather thrives when that is put at the forefront. I've played this a few times now, and every time has been enjoyable, but it's been different levels of enjoyable. There was one game night where it was 5 of us, we played this to starting the night, and it was great, it was a blast, everybody had a really fun time. And then we played a few other games, and then we decided at the end of the night, hey, do you want to just play Veiled Fate again because we all enjoyed it so much? And everybody said yeah, and we partook in it. But because it was the end of the night and we were a little bit more tired, the bluffing aspect kind of fell by the wayside, and we just sort of pursued our own objectives. And that was probably the least engaging or least fun time that I've played Veiled Fate, because there wasn't that social element to it. When you're just moving pieces on the board and trying to move your tracks up, it's fun, it's a fine puzzle, but it isn't nearly as exciting as when you're talking about who you think the other person is, and then at the end when they reveal themselves and you were dead wrong, and you get to have that discussion point and that discussion afterwards. It doesn't nearly touch those levels of excitement and joy. It's just kind of, it's okay. But if you have a group that really engages in that bluffing aspect of things, it's really good and it's really fun. One other element of the game that I was really surprised about is the player count. So I've played this at 2 players, 5 players, and 6 players, which in essence is sort of a 3-player team game. So at 6 to 8 players, there are going to be 2 people around the table who share a demigod. So I might be on the green team, and you also might be on the green team. Then those 2 are on yellow, and those 2 are on pink in the 6-player game. And so we all have a vested interest in moving the green forward and bluffing to the other people. In a 2 to 5 player game, everyone has their own god, and you don't have anyone else to rely on. You're just relying on other people moving your piece forward in a bluff, and then you getting to laugh maniacally when they do. And it's interesting, because I thought for me that the optimal way to play this game would be the 6 to 8 player version. And I think it plays very well at the 6 player. I can see it playing equally well at the 7 and the 8 player. But for me, I think my favorite way to play this is inexplicably at the 2 player level, because of the amount of gods not being used. There's only one other god that you have to worry about at that 2 player level, and that's the god of your opponent. And so if I'm going to bluff with a couple other pieces, the chances of me accidentally moving my opponent's piece forward and giving them a bonus is a lot less. At the 5 player game, it was a lot harder to bluff, or a lot scarier to bluff, because you didn't know if you were going to be moving somebody else's piece. And so at that 2 player level, you really get that excitement of the bluffing element, because you don't have to worry about anything else. You can worry about just the one piece. And that to me was really fun. Or it could just be because I played that with Zach, and it was our first time both of us playing the game, and immediately he picked up the green piece and looked at it and was like, oh, after looking at his card, and I said, you probably shouldn't pick up the piece of the color that's on your card. And he made a big show about him making a mistake and, oh, we should switch cards. We should redo it. And I'm like, no, you can just bluff, Zach. I don't know if that was a bluff. And then I looked at my card, and I was the green card. I was the green demigod, so I knew he wasn't green. And that was a whole ploy to try to get me to think he was green and that he was going to be bluffing with green, and then, well, I was green. And so that particular scenario made for a very funny event as we worked it out, and he tried to bluff with green a little, and then he saw me moving it and got scared and then bluffed with something else. But I'm so surprised that this works well at a 2-player count. And even with the 6-player count, the reason why I like that a lot more than the 5-player count is, again, because of that bluffing element. With 6 players, there's only 3 demigods in play, meaning that there are 6 other ones that you can bluff with freely and not accidentally move someone's piece. And there's also a fun satisfaction of figuring out who your partner is and giving them a little knowing look across the table and figuring out how to correspond your actions so that other people don't think that you're working together. That's also a lot of fun. At the 5-player, again, it was fun, but you have less of that bluffing element, or maybe a little bit more. It has to be a little bit scarier. As you can tell from me reliving my experiences, this is an awesome game. It really is, but only for the right group. I can't specify how much of the mechanics might falter if you don't enjoy that bluffing aspect, if you don't enjoy trying to suss each other out across the table. I just think there's not enough actual strategic decisions, or tactical decisions, I should say, to make it feel like a rich, dense game, especially for the price point. This is pretty much only available to order on Ivy Games' website. It's not in wide retail. Hopefully it'll get there someday, but Ivy Studios, they make games with premium products, and that comes with a premium price tag. The component quality is great. The board is beautiful, the art's beautiful, the board is so thick and sturdy. Even if the card design is stupid, that they have these little flecks of dust on them that makes you think, and literally every person who I've played with at one point during the game has looked at one of the cards and tried to scratch off the dirt that has made its way onto the card, only to realize that that was part of the design. Why that's part of the design, I cannot understand, but it is. It is so much so that I've lost my train of thought. Yeah, I'm talking about the components. They make games of a premium quality, and this is running, I think, right now at the time of this review. Again, these sorts of things could change depending on whatever, and there's different versions of this, one with minis, one without, but I think the one with the minis is coming in at that $89 price point. And that was the one that a lot of people wanted and a lot of people grasped. Back on Kickstarter, when it first was around, there was a cheaper version which had standees and less thick cardstock for around that $50 price point maybe. And that's what I do wish that this game was. It is an exceptional game. If money is no object, then, and you like social deduction, then this is one to absolutely consider, do more research, and I would really advise picking up. But I also asked everybody who I played with, how much do you think this cost? How much would you be willing to pay? And if it was $100 Canadian, would you feel like that was a good enough deal? And the answers were usually, that feels too expensive for the experience that it provides. And I think that's to be said about a lot of social deduction games, right? When the game itself is a facilitator and is facilitating this awesome social discussion that is very much dependent on your group, it's also your group that's providing the the entertainment value, and makes it a little bit harder to analyze on a gameplay value, so to speak, the highs and the lows. And I feel it'll also make it hit fairly differently with groups that thrive in this environment and those that don't. And I think that is where my hesitancy stems, because if you're unfamiliar with this channel, I'm fairly budget conscious on just wholeheartedly recommending this game to everyone, because I think there is the chance that it won't hit as much as it did with my group. And I can't help but feeling that the component quality isn't necessary, that this could have been produced at a lower quality with less deluxe components, and you could have the exact same experience, and you could have the exact same fantastic experience without a heavy metal coin that when you flip it and catch it which is a game mechanic if there are ties, that it doesn't hurt your hand when you slam it against it. The rulebook itself is also it's just bad. There's a whole section devoted on how to choose the first player, written in a way that makes you feel like it must be done this way. And then you realize, oh, it's just a random way of determining first player. There's so many elements of over-explaining in the rulebook, writing it as though it's going to be looked at with a magnifying glass or with a fine-tooth comb, when it's just a simple social deduction bluffing game. I'm really not a fan of how the rulebook is presented. It's not that difficult a game to grasp, and yet the rulebook makes it seem doubly complicated than it actually is. So, with those caveats, and even though I personally think it is overproduced, I still can't help but commend and sing the praises about the quality of game and the quality of experience that it has provided me. This, to give it on my rating system, gives an absolute seal of distinction and is probably one of my favorite gaming experiences of the year. I really enjoy this game. I think it is exceptionally well done, especially in the way that it creates that above the table interaction. You need a specific amount of energy to commit to it to get its full value, but it is one that I have been loving and am actively looking forward to playing again. And one that I think I'd be able to pull out in a very large variety of situations. Even if the group doesn't like bluffing, I know I harp on that a lot, I still think I could pull it out, and a lot of different people have enjoyed playing it, and it has provided a really nice experience. My girlfriend really enjoys this dumb game called Spy Alley, where you are trying to collect different things pertaining to your own nationality and get to your embassy before anybody else. And this gives me those vibes, but in a game that is actually good, that isn't roll or move and that's it. And it's also incredible that it gives a pretty fun bluffing game and deduction-ish game with just 2 players. I feel confident in highly recommending it, and I think it's one you should be on the lookout for. Anyway, I hope that was helpful if you're interested in purchasing Veiled Fate or not, if you're wondering about it. If you have any questions, as always, let me know in the comments below. My name's Chris George. I don't have a catchphrase. But again, if this was helpful, gently graze that like and subscribe button because it helps me out a lot and makes me feel not so alone inside. And also means that you and I might be on the same team, which means that you're gonna win. We're gonna win. You're gonna win, and I'm gonna ride off of your coattails. Thanks for being here. Let me know if you have played it, if you enjoyed it, and please don't let me know if you bought it based off of me and you don't like it. I'm sorry. But somehow with the quality of game, I don't see that happening. I'll see you in the next one.